Well, hello, lovely listeners. Welcome to episode 160 of Assist with Impact. As you know, I am really committed to continuing to bring you episodes of the podcast, and I'm excited to have reached another milestone, episode 160. This week, I have the absolute pleasure to bring you my interview with Steuart Snooks from Revolutionise Your Inbox. Let me tell you a little bit about Steuart if you're not familiar with him. He is a Melbourne, Australia-based email and workplace productivity expert. He works with business owners, executives, their assistants and support teams who he describes as being overloaded with email and crying out for practical, affordable solutions to the relentless demands of email and the workload it drives. Steuart has over 25 years' experience in researching and developing best practices for managing incoming email and workload and restoring email to its rightful place as a powerful tool to facilitate improved workplace and personal productivity. Now, Steuart has developed a breakthrough method that revolutionises the way executives and their assistants manage inboxes. His aim is to elevate the skills and knowledge of you, the assistant, so that you can free up your time, energy, and headspace to be able to offer greater support to your executive. And that enables your executive to then be able to focus on the higher order thinking, strategic focus, and leadership aspects of their role. So much of the work that Steuart does is with the assistant, minimising the time commitment needed by the executive. Now, I can tell you that one of the things that I most love about Steuart is that he and I are very much on the same page in that there is a difference between being effective and being efficient. You can be very efficient at managing your executive's inbox, but that does not mean that you are being effective. And in this episode, we drill down into what it means to actually be effective. And Steuart very generously shares tips and tools and techniques that you can adopt literally after listening to this episode to really help you be more effective in the way you manage your leader's inbox and in the way you manage your own inbox. Now, at the end of the episode, I invite Steuart to share what programs he has coming up, and he talks about some of the programs that he has available, which are online learning programs. All the links to those will be in the show notes, but I cannot recommend this episode highly enough. And I hope you get as much value out of listening to it as I did out of speaking to Steuart. Hello, I'm Liz Van Vliet, and welcome to the Assist with Impact podcast. Join me as I explore the competencies and capabilities that allow you to assist with impact. I'll be sharing practical tips, strategies, and insights that will help you move beyond what I call the order taker zone and be that little hinge that can swing big doors. If you're ready to be more proactive and have more impact in your role, then this is the place for you. Let's get started with the episode. Well, hello, Steuart Snooks. It is lovely to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here, Liz. Thanks for the chance to contribute.
Thank you for making the time. Now, I just pronounced it Snooks. Is that the way you pronounce it?
I was going to pick that up, and then I thought I'll let it go. But
No, pick it up. How do you pronounce it? How should I have pronounced it?
Yeah, it's Snooks, Books, Chooks, Snooks. Looks rather than Snooks, Books, Lukes, and upper nose.
I love that because mine, whenever I introduce myself, I tell people that it's Van Vliet as in feet, not Vliet as in plie. So,
yes. Well, the harder thing's the spelling of my first name.
I know.
So we should clear the air there because people will think you've got it wrong, but it's Steuart. It's not one of the other two major ones, and that came about from being named after the actor Stewart Granger. I became Stewart Grant, and the spelling was from a book my father was reading about British World War II pilot Douglas Robert Stewart Barter, written by an Australian Paul Brickell, actually. And my dad thought that'd be a good idea, and I've been paying for it for 50 plus years, getting Vic Roads and credit card companies and Medicare to get the spelling right.
As someone who has lots of vowels in my surname, I can totally empathise with you. Yes. Vowels are the things that trip people up, aren't they?
Well, I nearly died late last year. My sister, one of my three sisters, finally spelled it right. She's been sending me cards and emails and things for years, never ever got it right. She had all the vowels in there, but never in the right order. I nearly died. I didn't try and teach her, but she finally got it right after 55 years or whatever. It was amazing.
Well, that is excellent. Very good to hear. Well, it's great to have you here. And you may or may not be aware that, so we first connected a few months back when you and I were both on the agenda for Lucy Brazier's executive ES Global event. And that was, it is a small world, especially in the, the administrative sort of training and sort of information space, but I had not heard of you. Yes. And it was an absolute revelation for me. And I loved your presentation there. And then I went on an absolute Steuart Snooks binge fest, watching clips of you on YouTube and listening to podcasts, other podcasts that you've been on. And the reason I found it so fantastic was exactly what you talk about on your website, which is you are so practical. And I'm all about practicality. I love concepts and theories, and I have methodologies and frameworks coming out my, bazumba, but I love giving people practical tips. So I'm looking forward to being able to get you to give us some of those today. But before we get into that, I would love it. Listeners to the podcast know that whenever I have a guest on, I always ask them to describe in brief their experience navigating what I call the career spider frame, which is the idea of rather than you being on a linear ladder, our careers can go all over the place, like children climbing on a spider frame in a park. Yeah. So I know what your background is, but would you like to share with the listeners what has been the trajectory of your career?
Sure. When I left school, I wanted to be a winemaker. I had enrolled to do that. I was convinced to defer for a year, and so I never got there. But I did work my first decade in the wine industry, restaurant, retail, wholesale, went to France, picked grapes, had a great time, got to late 20s and thought, what am I going to do with my life? I'd always wanted to combine wine and travel, wine and education. So I thought, I'll get inside of travel and see how that works, and then I can pull packages together. Travel was a bit of a disappointment, glamorous on the outside, but just hard work on the inside. Mm. And I was coming back to the wine trade, but I just got married, so I knew I didn't want to work restaurant hours. I didn't want to get stuck in a small bottle shop. And there was an opportunity to work with Daytimer, time management company who specialised in those ring binder style.
Oh, I remember them. Yes.
So I thought, I'll do this for a year or two, and maybe I'll become a specialist to the wine trade. And maybe one day I will. It just hasn't happened that way. So I was a glorified telemarketer, I suppose, a sales consultant, getting people to buy the product and attend the time management course. And that then, I then diversified into a range of professional development courses. But time management was always the one that fascinated me the most, because I thought, we're never going to solve this. This is always going to be an issue. As the world gets faster and more complex, what's needed to manage time which is limited, is going to be a greater need. And more clients were saying to me, Steuart, our biggest time management problem is email. Have you got something just for email? So I went looking for a provider. There was one in Sydney who had been a speed reading company who specialised in online reading. So then they talked about managing email. And there was another, Priority Management had an email course at that time. That was it. I couldn't connect with the Sydney people, being Melbourne based. They just didn't get to Melbourne often enough. And I thought, I have spent so much time sitting with people at their desk doing one-on-one coaching after a time management. I probably know as much about this as anyone. So I put forward a proposal. The client loved it. I loved it. And I spent a year intensively researching what's best practice in this area, what's going on. And that's just continued for 17 years now.
Wow. That is so fascinating. I love that. We've got such similarities, because that is, how I got started doing what I'm doing, was researching best practice.
Yes.
And using the skill that you clearly, as an ex-salesperson as well, communicating, interpersonal relationships with people, bringing your talents to bear in this thing that you identified a real pain point for people. That's so fascinating. And 17 years, email has changed a lot in 17 years. But that's 17 years of deep knowledge that you have in where people, the patterns that people fall into with their email, I'm imagining.
Yes. As you say, email has evolved enormously, but our skill set has not kept up with that.
Aha.
And I say to people, you've been using email for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, but your skills probably have not changed all that much at all. You know how to send, receive, file, but the rest of it you've learned by trial and error or a tip from a friend. You haven't intensively learned how to do this. And so your skill set is, you need a 20-year upgrade. You think you've got 20 years experience. I suggest you've got 1 year's experience 20 times over. And there's a world of difference.
That's a really good observation. So let's just zoom out a little bit, because one of the things that I really loved about your presentation at ES Global was you outlined your framework, or how do you describe it? Describe for the listeners the way you view this inbox email environment.
Yeah, sure. So when we talk about incoming email, most of our issues fall into one of three key areas. I used to call this the WWW of mastering email. I tried to pick up on that thing and it never really stuck. It's a geeky sort of thing. When I come up with a process that really works, I now call it revolutionise your inbox, because the key skill for mastering day-by-day incoming email is something that I've been working with for 3 years that does that. It revolutionises the inbox. So the three key areas, we've got to get control of when we are trying to pay attention to this aspect of our workload. We're trying to do it all the time on an ongoing basis, and it just doesn't work. So we've got to get control of when and do that in a structured way instead of unstructured, with full attention instead of partial attention. And we'll do it much, firstly, better quality and a lesser quantity. We'll spend less time on it, but it'll be better quality time. So the three W's are when. The second one is what. What is your process, your methodology, your system? Are you just ad hoc in the way you do email, or do you have a process, and do you have a proven process that actually works? And the third W is where. Where do you store it when you need to keep working on it, keep track of it? Where do you store it when you're finished with it in a way that allows you to then get it back quickly? So you want to store it quickly, get it back quickly, and use up as little of your own headspace as possible. With paper systems, filing cabinets, about 70% of what we file, we never look at again. With email, it's closer to 95%, but the 5% we do need is really important. So we need to be able to get it. So those three W's, getting control of when, what it is we do, and where we store it.
Fantastic. So in terms of the when, I think one of the things, I hear a lot from assistants is that this sort of falls into where I work with assistants, is in terms of them being able to advocate and for themselves and have a voice in terms of the way they perform their role. But one of the objections that I hear often from assistants when I talk about this idea of attention management and focus and effectiveness, and saying you actually need to have a plan for when, and an agreed approach for when you are going to look at your inbox and when you're going to look at the inbox that you are monitoring on behalf of your leader. And they will say, oh, but that's not up to me. That's something that my manager determines. Yes. What would you say to that?
Yeah, that's the first point of resistance, is people think they have to be available, particularly in EA roles, to everybody all the time. Do you think because you're in a support role, you can be everything to everyone all the time? And you can't, or at least not effectively. And I am surprised at how often when I show them some models to structure when they look at an email, they very quickly take them up. I thought I'd get a lot more resistance to this. So the first thing I show them is that doing it the way they are now, which is pretty much a working style of anybody can interrupt anybody else about anything at any time, is chaotic. I do a little multitasking exercise, which blows them away. It just, they thought they could multitask. And it's very quickly, I get them to write out their letters A to Z. We time that. The numbers 1 to 26, we time that, add up the 2 times. Then we do the both together. And it takes them 50, 80, 100, 200, 300% longer, with a lot more effort needed, and they make mistakes. And it really makes them see, hey, I realise that. And they have now been working, particularly since COVID, they understand themselves that they can't maintain this. And the thing they want most is peace of mind and headspace. So then I show them 3 models. You could check it every half hour. If you're in a highly responsive role, check it every half hour, 5 minutes, and then 25 minutes of getting stuff done, and separate those 2 activities instead of multitasking everything all at once. The second one is once an hour. And I show how research has shown that that's the most popular practice now, once an hour. What's the worst thing that can happen if someone has to wait an hour for an email? Email is not meant to be urgent. If there's some urgency in an email, it should be flagged by some other tool like a text message or a phone call, not rely on the email on its own. And then the third model I show them is the one that I've been showing for all of that 17 years, which is for most people in most roles, 4 planned times a day. And then you choose a model and you flex from there according to your role, according to your day, but at least they have some sort of structure that they can hang their day on. It's completely unstructured.
Yeah, I love it. And I think what I'm also hearing is when you were talking about the second approach of, checking you're in the inbox once every hour, and the idea that email is not meant to be instantaneous. I think that is a misnomer that so many people fall back on and work in that fashion. And I'm also find, and again, this is something that I talk to assistants a lot about, is if something is that urgent, it shouldn't be, as you just said, it shouldn't be in an email. Another form of, synchronous communication is far better and more appropriate. And, hey, let's get old fashioned. Let's pick up the phone or jump on a video call with somebody rather than relying on putting it in an email. And so it's these, paradigm shifts that also need to happen, don't they?
Exactly. And a lot of EAs would have kids. I mean, how would you feel if your kid had an accident at school and they just sent you an email?
Yes.
And you didn't pick it up for a while. I mean, you'd be really, and if you send an email and want an urgent response and you don't get it, what do you do now? Send another email?
Yeah.
you change your tool of communication. And then the other paradigm shift you talk about, because getting people to do this is really hard, because it seems mechanical and clunky and almost like putting yourself in a straitjacket, but of course it's not. It's enormously freeing when you can do it. But I say, who has meetings? Do you have meetings? Yeah, you've got meetings all the time. Are they in the calendar? Yes, they're in the calendar. Do you keep up with them? Yes, I keep up with them. What's the definition of a meeting? And apart from, a waste of time, it's a conversation with one or more other people. Defines what a meeting is, face to face. What about webinars, teleconferences, phone appointments? Are they in the calendar? Yes, they are. What are they? Conversation with one or more other people. And you keep up with them. Okay, now what's the definition of email?
Aha.
Head slap. Oh, it's a conversation with one or more other people. Meetings are verbal and visual. Phone appointments and so on are verbal. They may have a visual if you Zoom, but email's neither. It's written, it's digital. Which conversation is harder to get right? Which one's harder to make yourself understood with? And yet it's the one we don't set aside dedicated time for. And people just slap their head going, oh, duh.
Yeah.
And so hopefully it changes their paradigm and they go, email is actually so important. I need to set aside time to get it right.
Yep.
You know?
Okay, so we've talked about when. Let's talk about the second W.
Sure. Yeah, what is your process? David Allen talks about this in his GTD process, about we need to have a process that's consistent, reliable, repeatable, and you can do almost in your sleep. It's just a process. You run your process. That's the first step. The second step is we need to do some thinking. We have to look at an email and identify what's got to happen next. And that's hard work. That takes mental work. And we need to make decisions. To make decisions, we need thinking time. To have thinking time, we need to set aside the time. We need to schedule it, because the brain will only skip across the surface if we're doing it as a sort of task switching thing. And then the third thing is we must have some sort of system to capture the results of that thinking and decision making outside of our head that we can trust, that's reliable. And I say we need a system that captures what I need, stores it where I need it, but only brings it back to my attention when I need it.
Okay.
The problem is the inbox does the first two. It keeps what you need where you need it, right in front of you, but it doesn't control when. And so we are manually constantly looking at email and prioritizing, reprioritizing, no, ignore that, no, that's later, and looking at that email 5 times and putting it off until we actually come back and actually do something with it. Whereas I show people how to set up their inbox so that you can capture what your next action is going to be and when you're going to do it. And now it drops into place for that day and time, and the mind can let go of it. And
I can attest to how powerful that is, Steuart, because I saw you demonstrate that when I saw your presentation, and it was really powerful. That just it was just so powerful. There's no other word for it. So I would encourage the listeners to find some way of tapping into Steuart's process and this approach that you outlined for us at that session. Okay, so
just on that, Liz, because if you don't capture it outside your head's trying to keep track of all this stuff, and it uses up a lot of RAM.
Yes.
Random access memory. And the poor old, you just find it struggle to think straight, and you don't know why. It's because the subconscious part of the mind is trying to keep track of so many open ends that you're not in control of. We need to capture that outside of the brain, do the work with the brain, but then capture the results outside of the brain.
Yeah.
And free up an enormous amount of headspace, but also a sense of being in control and empowerment and morale. When EAs are particularly sensitive to their environment and how they're going and how well they're doing, and if they feel like they're struggling within themselves, they won't feel confident that they're all that much help to other people. It's the old sort of fit your mask before helping others.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yes, thanks, Steuart. And I'm sure everyone would agree that that is something that, if it falls into, when I'm talking, I've done episodes and I always include this in my training, is the idea of attention management. It's not just about controlling your time, it's about controlling your attention and your ability to focus. And that's exactly what you're describing.
Yes. In fact, I call that workshop the attention management workshop. It's the when strategy, but attention management, I call, when we talk about the what, it's the folder management and calendar management. And then, folder management when we're talking about where, but inbox management and calendar management in the two what's.
Okay.
Yeah. So attention management. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then the last one is that's the where.
Yep.
So, yep. And so you just mentioned folders, and I'm really curious because, in this day and age, there seems to be conflicting opinions about the merits of using folders versus, archiving or perhaps it's having too many folders. So what's your position on folders?
Sure. There tends to be two schools of thought. Those that are highly organised over the years have developed a hierarchy of folders. And I'll ask people, who's got folders and subfolders? Most people put their hands, and subfolders and subfolders and sub. How long do you play this game? Who's given up on that and said, this is too hard, I leave everything in the inbox? Now, EAs tend not to do that, but their bosses do. A lot of senior executives have just given up on the housekeeping because the volume's too much, and they just leave everything in the inbox. I know where it is. It does make a mess, but at least I know where it is. And the best combination is leaving everything in one location, one folder, is actually a good strategy. It just shouldn't be the inbox. The inbox is a work in progress area. It should only be for things that need action. Once it's finished with, it should go to another folder or folder structure. And the simpler that folder structure, the easier it is to manage. The ultimate model is just one folder, and you call that done, complete. I call it filing cabinet. You could also make use of archive folder in Outlook, but the principle is goes to one place. So it's quick. It's very easy to know where to go when you want to send it. Also easy to know where to go when you want to get it back. But the problem is people then need to find it in that one big folder. And so I know in Outlook, for example, and the same in Gmail, you can put labels on it in Gmail or categories in Outlook. So as I say to people, every folder name that you give is a label. And everyone in the world's got a different folder structure because we use different labels, we think different ways. Well, use that label as a category instead and put it into one single folder, and you can set up that folder so that it separates by category. So it actually looks like a folder structure, but it's all in one single location. And then
love it.
Hand in glove with that is start using search more effectively. Search has evolved enormously in the last decade or so, but people's skill set in using it has not. And I show people two really quick, simple things in Outlook search that they go, what I do is get them to type in the name of someone they have a lot of contact with, and they'll get 997. Then I go, okay, click the from button, now type in their name. Now suddenly you're only getting 75 because you're only getting the ones that came from that person. When you put in the generic name, it searches the subject line, the body, the message, attachment, search everywhere. It's too wide. People go, search is no good. No, you just haven't learned how to use it. And then the second thing is I go, let's assume you're looking for something from that person with attachments. Click the has attachments button. See, now suddenly you've only got 3. And they go, wow, why didn't someone show me this before? Yeah, just those two simple little things make a real difference. There's a whole range of others, but they're the two big ones. So once you can find your stuff easily, you're much more inclined to put it in one place.
Love it. Yep. Okay. All right. Now, I would love it if just because you've already shared some fantastic tips, but I would love it if you could give me just, let's go with your 3 top tips that the listeners could adopt, literally today, that would revolutionize their inbox.
Okay, well, I'll have to give you 3 tips that rely on them being able to do this themselves without me having to teach a new way to restructure. Number 1 is the start of the day. How do you start your day? Do you start your day looking at the inbox, and how does that feel? What a great way to start the day. You're looking at the bright, shiny, new, urgent things at the expense of things that you've already committed to. So I get people to set up so that calendar comes up first. First thing you see is your calendar, because that is big picture. It should show you the commitments that you have already made, probably as a result of email yesterday or the day before or last week, instead of diving straight to the email, straight to the new at the expense of the things you've already got a commitment to. See big picture first. That might only take 5 seconds, might take 3 minutes, 5 minutes. You might spend half an hour doing your highest priority task and getting that out of the way before you give yourself the pleasure of checking all the new stuff in the inbox. So it's sequencing, big picture first. And then second thing, okay, what's coming overnight or this morning that I'm going to need to factor into what I had planned for my day to be? Now, a lot of EA's days are driven by the short term, but a lot of them say, it's just such a calming way to start the day is have a look at my calendar, see what my boss is doing, see what I'm doing before I dive into, because once you get into the inbox, you're running, and it's very hard to take a breath and step back and see big picture again after you've dived in. So if you don't start the day that way, you'll probably never get there. That makes a big impact, not today, but as a consistent practice. It changes your framework, your mode of thinking. And then I get to say my dad joke, Liz.
Oh,
the
give
calendar,
it to us.
The calendar is a much better outlook on your day than the inbox.
Well done. Love a good dad joke.
And it's sickening, but hopefully it helps people remember as well.
Yes.
Start big picture before you get into the, fit your own mask. What's the stuff you've already got a commitment to before you dive into taking on new stuff?
Yep.
Because we as humans, particularly women and particularly EAs, try to be all things to all people at all times, and you can't do it. You've got to pick your fights. You've got to, get your priorities right. Start the day that. The second thing would be, once we talk about scheduling times for email, but even if you don't, just turning off the alerts. Just manage your attention. If you have the alerts on, somebody else is managing your attention. Even if you look at it quickly and dismiss it, it's already broken your concentration, shifted your focus. Now you find it hard to get back on track again. So turn all the alerts off. Obviously, you're going to be reluctant to do that if you don't know, when am I going to check email? So that's why I talk about, let's schedule in some sort of structure. Now that you have a structure, you know when you're going to check email, turn all the alerts off. And then along with that is manage other people's expectation, because you're playing the game a different way now. And then there are times that you are in the inbox all the alerts are off, but you physically see new ones arrive and they interrupt you. So you can use the work offline function so you can maintain your concentration to work on the ones you've already got. So number one, calendar as default. Number two, turn off all the alerts. Number three, that's a good one. Probably a couple of those search tips would be the ones that I'm finding. There's a whole range of things. It's hard to pick of just one thing. If there was another one, it would be learn how to use quick steps in Outlook, because that's multiple things that you can do with one click.
Okay, now here's a good question that I've had raised by somebody, a few people on a recent training that I was doing, which is things like quick steps and rules. If it's not your inbox, if you are managing your leader's inbox, how do you approach setting up quick steps and rules in the inbox of the person that you're supporting? What's your advice there?
Well, you'll need to set up on their device or machine as well as your own.
Yeah, okay. And that's what I said to them. I said, well, just ask them if you can have, 10 minutes on their device so that you can do it, or ask them to give you access. I used to have access all of the emails for my boss, and say, I'm just logging you out so I can log in and set up this quick step or whatever it is that you're doing in terms of rules.
Yes. I cover 7 or 8 of those ways to speed up email processing and replies using the technology. I call that the automation strategy workshop. Rules is one. If you constantly doing the same thing, set up a rule and get the machine to do it for you. And you can run that retrospectively to do a bit of a cleanup. The second one is templates. You're often writing an email and you want to use some text you've used before. So save it as templated text that you can drop in very quickly using templates in Outlook. Drafts, I'm amazed at how few EAs use drafts the way that they could be used. They'll often use them for an email that they draft and then go back and send. I say, no, if you are constantly sending emails that are pretty much the same, even sometimes to the same person, even sometimes with the same attachment, and it's like a template that you can use time and time again. An enormous time savings there. The third one is, so that is the third one, drafts. The fourth one is signatures. I'm surprised at how many EAs use signatures instead of templated text. But the problem with signatures is it only replaces what's at the bottom. And that's about all it does. And so it's designed specifically for signatures. You've got quick parts, which inserts a quick part of text, very much like templates. Quick steps is the one which I think is a gold one. I say to EAs, it's like having your own EA. It'll do multiple things for you and free up an enormous amount of time in a multiple step process. For an example of one is a quick got it, thanks email. So you get an email in, you know that they're going to be wondering if you've got it or not. They're going to get a phone call in 3 minutes. You can just click one button and it sends back, got it, thanks, which means they have had an acknowledgement. They're at peace. You're at peace. You're not going to have someone chasing you up in 3 minutes. And it's just one click will do that. And there's a whole range of things that with one click you can do a manual action that has multiple steps. Then there's also autocorrect, and EAs love autocorrect. It's the spell checker. We what I call hijack the spell checker. There are regular words, phrases you type all the time, and you type them out manually. Like I type capital PLS and then hit the space bar, and it fills out, please contact me at any time if you've got a question. Whatever I can do, I'm here to help. I just type 3 letters space bar, auto fills. I type T&C for terms and conditions, fills out two sentences. There's a whole range of things that you type regularly, and you can use the spell checker. You're starting to see text prediction come in as well, but it's not as prevalent as with mobile phones. But you can do your own text prediction and control it by using the autocorrect function. And then the last thing, not so much for EAs, although I say, hey, if you break your fingernail or your finger or your wrist, how are you going to continue? So much of your work is done through a keyboard. And if you're inhibited there, how are you going to work? Well, you can use the dictate or voice to text function. And it's particularly useful for your executives because they often have complex messages, and it allows them to think clearly about the message without the frustration of typing and misspelling and grammar checking. And then they can come back and clean it up later, or get you as the EA to clean it up later.
Love it.
There's 8 ways to speed things up. At my age, my typing's getting worse, and I'm starting to use the dictate function more and more.
I've been doing some work this week and using the dictate function, and I love it. It's because I love to talk. So, I'm a much faster speaker than I am a typist.
Yes. And that's how I frame. That's my first question at the start of that particular workshop is you and I can think and speak a lot quicker than we can type. And yet so much of our work is done through a keyboard and mouse. So that's the bottleneck to being productive. We can only go as fast as our typing speed. But if we can expand that by 7 or 8 ways to capture things that we would have typed before and bring it back very quickly, it's like oiling the greasy, the wheels. It really smooths things, makes things a lot quicker.
Love it. Look, Steuart, I think it's really important to just remind everyone that, at the end of the day, I'm all about helping assistants be more effective. So there's efficiency, but I talk about that it's one thing to be efficient, it's another thing to be effective. And I love that what that is really what, if we had to put everything under an umbrella, it's about effectiveness. It's not just about efficiency. And it's also about so much of what you've talked about is, getting assistants out of this order taker zone that they find themselves stuck in, where they're being reactive rather than proactive. And I just think that there's been so many great tips shared in what you've shared with us today that, it's just, and I know that it's only the tip of the iceberg, that there's so much more gold, so much more beneath the surface for listeners to be able to tap into with you. So can you just share with the listeners, I mean, I've got listeners all around the world, but I'd love you just to share, what you've got coming up in terms of events that listeners might be able to tap into.
Sure. Like you, my aim is to help EAs free up a lot of headspace, free up time, energy and headspace so they can be more effective in their roles and help their executives and the people around them free up their time, energy and headspace. But EAs are so busy just keeping up with what they've got now. They're up to their neck flat out. They've reached the limit of what they can do with their current skill set. And there is a breakthrough that you can get. And so I run 3 programs. The flagship program is called Revolutionise Your Inbox. It used to be a 1-day workshop. COVID forced it online, which made it a lot better. It's now it was 6 weeks. It's now 8 weeks. I build in a kickoff session. So we set the scene. The key workshop is setting up the inbox to work more effectively. And then I have an hour's coaching the 3rd week of that. And that unpacks the whole WWW strategy. That first workshop, just for triage, that's a standalone. So it's like an entree instead of the main course, so people can get a taster. And then the back end of that is, what about sending email? What about sending more effective outgoing email? So that's the second course. I also have a colleague who looks after OneNote and Teams because they integrate with Outlook in particular. I also have a program to train up inbox VAs, EAs who might go out on their own and want to specialise in just providing an email service to senior executives who have an EA but don't want to use them for their email, or just don't have an EA but need to outsource the email management function. But they're the 2 key programs. I have them on certain dates, but what I'm doing more and more is saying, sign up for the on-demand. Start anytime you like, progress at your own speed, watching the recordings. And I'm here to support with weekly coaching. I run a weekly Dr. Email Q&A forum and unlimited one-on-ones. So if you get stuck, I actually was running the Dr. Email and one of the ladies said, oh, listen, I've got a problem. And I said, just show me your screen. I reckon I could pick it in a millisecond. And my EA who was listening, Steuart, are you sure you should say that? And I said, yeah. Anyway, she showed a screen. I said, yep, straight away, there's the problem. Click that, fix that, bang. Online learning has allowed me to be so much more powerful because I can see what's really going on and answer questions they wouldn't think to ask for themselves. Solve issues that they don't even know they've got. So when it was a one-to-one workshop and I'd look over their shoulder at a small screen laptop for 20 seconds at a time, I was limited in how I could help. But now I can see people and see how they operate. It's just made so much more practical difference, as you say.
That's excellent. Well, I will, of course, include links in the show notes for listeners who want to find out more about those programs. And was there any final thoughts that you wanted to share with the listeners, Steuart?
The other thought is COVID's also forced us, it's increased email volumes, generally speaking. A lot of water cooler hallway across the desk conversations get pushed into digital channels, and email was a major source of them because it was the one we'd been using a lot. So it became overcrowded. As a result of that, we started to look for Teams and other tools. But as a result of COVID, also, we worked remotely and we needed to come up with our own structure for the day. And so I talked just briefly about where email fits into a structured day. And the next thing, once you've got your email part of your day under control, is to go on and restructure your overall day and week. And Donna McGeorge's First 2 Hours is the best book I've seen on this. And I will often refer people to Donna's book and the model she has about what sort of activities are best done in the first 2 hours, second, third, fourth 2 hours. And it's a terrific structure for those that now find themselves being EAs remotely, working from home, and they need to get their own day organised because it's not structured for them by the environment they walk into. The ideas that Donna has there, which hit all the high spots, all the time management stuff I've seen for 25 years, she summarises really, really well in that book.
That is a brilliant tip. I will find that book and I will put a link to it in the show notes as well.
And if you haven't had Donna on your podcast, she should be on your list. She's fantastic. She's full of life and vim and great ideas, and you won't get a word in edgeways. She's fantastic. She is.
Well, that's a great tip. I will be looking her up and I will be reaching out to her. Thanks, Steuart. Well, Steuart, it's been wonderful to have you on the podcast. I know without a shadow of a doubt that this is going to be a very popular episode, and I think it's going to inspire and motivate a lot of the listeners to adopt, Yes. I would be adopting all of your tips. So thank you so much for sharing your experience and your insights and those fabulous tips with the listeners.
Like you, I want to help the most important people in an organisation, and it's the EAs. The CEOs think they're the boss, but the boss is the head, but the head turns on a neck. The EAs are the neck, and they are, in fact, I reckon they're the most important people. You can turn the head if you get a good neck.
That is excellent. Well, thank you, Steuart.
Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see the show notes, head over to my website. It would be great if you haven't already done so. If you enjoyed the show, if you could kindly go to iTunes and leave a review. It helps other people find the show. Thanks for listening and have a great week.